Hello there and welcome back to our program. In our program we are discussing doing business on an international scale, becoming aware of what is required to be effective in international business. We've talked about negotiating and negotiating across cultures, and we have also looked at global contracts and how people perceive contracts internationally. We also have had a look at the capabilities that an executive or a senior manager needs to have in order to work in the international arena. I would like to take this one step further so you can understand that in the international environment there is a lot of understanding about emotional intelligence. And this is becoming very, very important when it comes to being able to deal across cultures. Emotional intelligence, as you well know, being a senior executive, is something that is required of managers and leaders, of course. And it is something that we need to utilize not only in our home countries, but certainly it goes across the board. Emotional intelligence is the ability that we need to be able to conduct business anywhere around the world, even in our own home country. It is an asset when you are aiming to do business internationally. And in many countries around the world now, leading executives are honing their emotional intelligence skills in order that they too can capably do business around the globe. As you well understand, knowledge is very, very important to our business practices. Knowledge of the technical skills we need, knowledge of our products that we sell or our services that we sell. We have to have knowledge. We have to be able to use our knowledge well. We have to be able to do certain parts of our business very, very well. We have to plan, organize, we have to do all these things. And this requires knowledge and capability. We also, in our jobs, have to be able to use information technology. We have to be able to use computers well. All of this is knowledge. And we gain knowledge through study, we gain knowledge through learning, through going to university, through understanding all the ins and outs of business procedures and practices. We gain knowledge in many, many ways. And being smart, we can say, being clever and knowledgeable is a very, very important part of anybody's position, of anybody's role. You as an executive or a senior manager have a lot of knowledge, and you have kept this knowledge with you over the years, and that is a very important thing. It allows you to be able to do your job and to do it well. But having knowledge such as we see here is just one part of the road to success in international business. Alongside having the capability to be able to conduct business is also another kind of knowledge that we need. We need to have what we say, knowledge about our emotions. We need to have what we call a certain amount of emotional intelligence. We need to know how to handle ourselves very well, not only at home but overseas. And we need to know to handle ourselves competently so that we can engage in discussions, so that we can build relationships, so that we can be fair, and all of these things that go with doing international business. So the knowledge here that we need is emotional intelligence. Termed EI for emotional intelligence, and the way to measure our EI is through our EQ, our quotient of emotional intelligence. I'm sure that you are familiar with emotional intelligence. In your position, it is most important that you are familiar with it. And as you know, one of the most prominent writers and researchers about emotional intelligence is Dr. Daniel Goleman. He said that if your emotional abilities are not in hand, are not well balanced, then, and if you don't have self-awareness or knowledge of who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, etc., and if you are not able to manage your impulses or your distressing emotional times, and if you can't have empathy and feeling for others, then it doesn't matter how smart you are, how much knowledge you have in terms of practical things. You are not going to get very far in business if you are only knowledgeable in certain practical aspects. So he says, if you have a good level of emotional intelligence, then that is going to help you along the way to being a very effective business communicator, international executive, leader, manager, etc. So we have what we call book smart, which is being knowledgeable of things that we learn from books, book smart. And we learn many, many things, and we go to university and we study and we become book smart. We also have knowledge in another way, which is street smart. And perhaps you might be able to relate to these two terms when we talk about intelligences. We are both smart, book smart, from things we learn, and we can be also street smart. And street smart tends to refer to the experiences we have along the way in life. And this can refer to our emotional intelligence. To take you through EI, I want to highlight and emphasize to you once more that if you wish to conduct successful business negotiations with international people, you're going to have to know yourself very, very well. And also you're going to have to know others and how to handle others extremely well. So as we both understand, EI talks about your own personal level of competence, your own ability to manage yourself, to manage who you are, and your own ability to know yourself, and to know indeed who you are. This is the first competence that we see in EI. The other competence is how we manage others. Not just ourselves, but how we manage and deal with other people, other relationships. And also how we see others, how aware we are of other people. So there are two important aspects to EI. The first group of competencies, our personal abilities, refers to ourselves, and the other group, the social competencies, refer to how we manage other people. It's quite simple. And when you're working internationally, these skills need to be honed very, very carefully, because you will be dealing with many, many different kinds of people in many different situations, and therefore your senses and your knowledge of yourself and your knowledge of how other people behave and work is going to be very, very essential. So let's take a look of how we look at ourselves. How do we know our own personal competence? First of all, about ourselves, we have to know our own emotions. This is exceptionally important if you're dealing with someone from another culture and international people who expect actually very professional behaviours in the people they deal with. Being aware emotionally of yourself is the first important step to knowing who you are. Getting a feeling of what your emotions are when you're getting upset, for example. Reading whether you're angry, whether you're confused, whether you're getting annoyed. Being totally self-aware of your emotions as they are happening is a key that is going to open the doors to you being able to perform your tasks very, very well. Recognizing what the impact will be of your emotions is going to help you through a lot of discussions with international people. These feelings you have are going to guide you as to what kind of decisions you make, and therefore you need to be totally aware of who you are. You need to be totally aware of your behavior, of the way you handle yourself, and of the strong points you have, and of the weaknesses you have too. It could be that you may have limitations when it comes to discussing things with other people. It could be that you are not very assertive when it comes to negotiating. So you need to know what your strong points are and what your limitations are. If, for example, your limitations are not being assertive or not being patient, for example, these are going to affect the way that you deal internationally in business circles. So you need to assess yourself very strongly and know your strengths and your weaknesses so that you can work to improve upon them. Take a very, very close look at yourself in this first part of EI, because once you begin to know yourself, then you will begin to know others far more keenly, far more accurately. Also, having self-confidence is part of knowing who you are and having awareness of your capabilities. Having strong self-confidence means having a very sound sense, a very firm sense of your own self-value and your own capabilities. If you are representing your organization, which may be a major organization overseas at some international business forum, or if you are signing contracts on an international and major level, then you need to have a great deal of self-confidence to be able to do that. If your self-confidence is lacking, then this is an area that you need to improve upon before you even begin to engage in international affairs. So we have these three areas of the first part of self-awareness in EI. And while we go along explaining them, I would like you to start to consider yourself, start to look at yourself. Take some notes, write down as we go along some notes about your strengths and your weaknesses and what you are lacking as we go through these competencies. The next part of being emotionally intelligent is dealing with ourselves. How do we manage our emotions, our personal emotions? Do we let them run wild? How do we manage ourselves? A lot of us actually need to have more control over our emotions and our impulses. And this is very important when we talk about EI. If you have emotions that ignite you or excite you to the point where you become extreme in your behavior, if you have emotions and impulses that mean that you shout out in anger or you lose your temper or you thump the table in a meeting. If you have these sorts of emotions that need to be controlled, then this is an area you need to look at. Emotional self-control is an absolute necessity when you're talking with international partners and customers. This is a very important thing to consider, because you may break that deal purely because of your inability to control your outbursts or your temper or your emotions. Keeping your emotions under control is essential. So in EI, this is what you need to look at if you are prone to losing your temper, if you are prone to having impulses that make you angry quite easily. In an international discussion, this sort of behavior is looked down upon very seriously. Because your partners believe that if your company wants to send you across the world to deal with them, then they should be sending someone who can control their impulses, who can behave well and manage themselves well in a heated discussion. When things go wrong, you need to be able to control the way you're behaving and be very professional. So your partners are looking at you to have quite a strong sense of emotional self-control. Are they under control, may I ask you? Is this an area where your emotions run away with themselves? Do you get hot under the collar and show your temper, throw pages across the table? Do you stamp your feet? Do you get up and say you're going to walk out? Are these impulses that you have? If you can't manage these emotions and these outbursts, then other people will see that that is not a good point in you. If you are depressed or you're caught by worry and you're swept away by anger and it shows in front of the meetings that you're trying to conduct, or indeed in front of the work when you're working with your international teams, then this kind of behavior is going to pull you back. It's going to stop you from moving forward and getting on with the process. It could end up that your international partners get fed up with you if you can't control your emotions and send or call your bosses back home and say, please send somebody else. It could happen in the worst case scenario. So what I'm trying to highlight to you here is you must have a certain level of emotional self-control so that you can conduct the international business you want to do in a very professional way and bring benefit to your company. Another aspect about how we manage ourselves is how we show we are honest and display integrity. To be transparent is very important. To be open is very, very essential in the way we conduct business. So being transparent and open will show that you are a trustworthy person, that you can be trusted in the negotiations and in the contracts. This is a competency that is very, very important in EI and indeed in international business. Actually, all of these competencies are important in any business, but more so when you're representing your company or even your country. So in managing yourself, you need to be emotionally self-controlled. You also need to be able to show yourself openly and be transparent, not hiding anything so that people start to assume there's something wrong. If something is going along in a very difficult way and you honestly want to say that it's causing you concern, then you must be honest and say that. Managing your emotions in a way that you show you're an honest and open person is going to give you bonus points in the negotiation process. Also, when you're conducting business, you will have to have the ability to adapt. This is an emotion that is also one of yours that you have to be able to show you are flexible. You are able to adapt in situations. Sometimes situations will change rapidly, and those changes may be unexpected. And therefore, you're going to have to adapt. So if you have this ability to manage yourself and adapt to the obstacles that come up along the way, then you will come away with a much more successful negotiation. It will show also that in the process of negotiating and problem solving with your partners, that you will most likely come to a win-win agreement because you are able to adapt and begin to solve obstacles that were unexpected. In working with people anywhere, showing that actually you have the drive, you have that energy and momentum behind you to want to achieve things is very, very important. And that you have the drive to improve performance and meet really great standards, that's important too. This will come out in your behavior, particularly when you're discussing a lot of problems and intricate issues with your international partners. If you give up, then you don't have this achievement competency. Giving up is not part of having EI. If you avoid and walk away, that's not part of having emotional intelligence. Having the drive to continue and to stay through all sorts of obstacles and want to have a great standard of partnership with your customers, that's part of having EI. So this is something that will come out in your discussions and in the communications you have. People will see it, that you have the desire to achieve and to get to the end of the process so you can begin the next step of the process. They also will notice whether you have the readiness to act, whether you take the initiative and whether you really seize opportunities. The person who goes abroad to try to arrange partnerships or deals, the person who is sent from an organization to discuss at a high level certain parts of an international partnership, does need to have initiative. They need to have the get up and go, the readiness to move forward and to seize opportunities as they come up and turn those opportunities definitely into action. So these abilities are very necessary ones. And as we talked earlier in our lessons, having optimism to be able to continue through the process, this is one of the emotions that you have to manage well. To see the upside in events, because along the way, and I guarantee it, you are going to come up against obstacles. You're going to come up against things that will change the way that you thought things might work. You're going to come up against a partner perhaps who argues that things can't go the way you want them. And so they come up with very negative responses to your proposals. So you're going to have to show that you have the optimism to carry through. And this is a wonderful ability where you can see the upside of events that come by looking at the positive aspects of things and finding out ways that you can work together to bring those positive aspects into play. Optimism will see you through a discussion. As I mentioned before, it's one of the most important characteristics of a very skilled negotiator. The minute you start to talk gloom and doom, then you set the whole tone for gloom and doom. And then you set people's thinking in that way of gloom and doom. If you maintain optimism in a conversation or in a business discussion, then you set the tone for possibility and opportunity. And then the thinking of your partners will be possibility and opportunity. And so you come away with a whole new result from your discussions. So we see here that the first part of EI is how you deal with yourself, how you manage those wonderful emotions you have been given, and how you make them have an effect on the people around you. Next up, we see that dealing with others is the next important part of EI. How you know others, your ability to be able to perceive others. And here, instead of talking about self-awareness, we are talking about social awareness. Social awareness can be of other people around you. Now, that can be in a personal sense with members of your family, your children, your wife, your grandmother. It can be with your friends around you who you see every day. It can be with the lady who's at the corner shop selling you soft drink, or it can be with people in business. So your ability to know others and be aware of others in business is critical to successful international business. Here we can see that empathy is the first on the list, the first point in the dimension of social awareness. And empathy has been mentioned very, very frequently throughout the lessons we've had together. It is one of the most important capabilities that any executive and indeed any manager can have. And to be brief about empathy, it is merely being able to sense other people's emotions and to have a genuine interest in the way that they are feeling. It's being able to understand that other people have a different view, maybe, or they have a different perspective of things as well. But basically, it is sensing that other people are having emotions just like you do, and taking a genuine interest and caring about what those emotions are and how they are affecting that person. Indeed, it is having that ability to sense without having to ask. Sensing if someone is feeling unwell without having to say, "Are you well or are you feeling sick?" This ability is one of the key abilities in the area of knowing other people. It could be that you have this. It could be that you need to sharpen this ability. Definitely, in negotiation discussions or when you're exchanging views or you're talking about the fine points of any project with people, even in your home country, and people most definitely of other cultures, you need to have a sense, an empathy to be able to understand what they're thinking and how they're feeling. This is one skill that will take you great places when you are negotiating with other cultures, and they will appreciate it for you as well. As well as having an awareness of other people, it's also important that you are able to see what's going on in the organization around you. Being able to read what's happening, reading the currents, we say, of what's going on in a company. Being able to know what department is sort of having problems with another department. Being able to understand who likes who is getting along with who is not getting along with who. Having an awareness of what's going on in the organization around you. Knowing what politics are at play, so to speak, at the organizational level. Knowing where the decision networks are. Being in tune with the organization as a whole and how it basically operates. We could say that it's a bit like feeling the unspoken pulse of a group. Having a feel about what's going on, whether there are changes that are happening and that there's going to be an enormous explosion at one level of the organization. Having that ability to sense that things are going wrong or that things are not quite right. Having the ability to sense that things are going well. So being able to know the politics, being able to know what is going on around you without really having to ask too much. This is organizational awareness. Of course you can refer and check up on things, but it's like having your eyes wide open and your ears wide open to everything that's going on. Watching and looking and taking in things and events as they happen in your own organization, absorbing them and taking note of them, being quite aware, quite accurate with things that you see happening. This is organizational awareness. And this is something you will need when you are dealing internationally as well. To know the other company you're talking to know when they walk into a room, to know whether there are decision makers walking in first, who are the leaders, who are the people involved, where the politics are, to feel the unspoken pulse of a group. It could be a group of people, not only an organization or a company. So this is organizational awareness of others in companies or in groups together, the collective group. This skill is very necessary, especially when you're meeting many, many people and in overseas countries where you're negotiating with teams of people. So if you have the ability to know how that group is, who is who, what is going on, where are the power plays, who is the decision maker, do people get along or not get along, that will help you immensely in the negotiation process. The other part of being aware of others is also being aware of the service needs of others. Not only the political awareness or organizational awareness, but awareness of their service needs. And this is important too. Very, very important when you're dealing with customers and international customers. Recognizing and meeting the client or customer needs. This is extremely necessary when you are dealing in large numbers in terms of finance or in large projects that you're going to put together that will provide service. It could be a telecommunication service across a major continent. So here, your ability, your awareness of what service needs are of people will get you to very, very successful negotiations, will move you forward in that process of dealing with your international customers. They will feel very good if you can display very service-oriented concerns and service-oriented interest towards them. If they know that you are really in tune with what their needs are, then that means that they will be more willing to take part in any contract that you are considering to go into partnership with. This is very important in customer-oriented proposals and projects. So they will have faith in you, they will have trust in you when they can see this and they see that you are service-oriented. So here we have the first domain of self-awareness, knowing yourself and managing your own emotions. We are now talking or have just spoken on the next domain of social awareness. How you see others, how you are able to feel and give empathy to others, how you see an organization, how aware you are of what's going on, and how service-oriented you are towards the people that you're dealing with in business. Finally, we come to the fourth domain, and in the terminology of EI, we call these areas domains. So we have domain number 4, which is relationship management. And this is relationship management of others. How do we guide others? Are you an inspiring kind of person? Are you able to inspire others to move? Are you able to motivate them with a compelling vision? in your own place of work? Are you able to manage your staff? Are you able to inspire them towards achieving the goals that you've set for them to achieve? How do you manage other people to work towards their goals? How do you inspire them? And indeed, when it comes to international business, an executive who can show that they have the ability to inspire in a meeting or in a discussion is really one step ahead of an executive who cannot. Others will listen to you. The people across the table with whom you are negotiating will listen if you can guide and motivate in a compelling way. In discussions, in negotiations, all of these particular capabilities will come to the forefront, and they can mean the difference between a win-win result or even a compromise. I guarantee if you start to use the EI competencies that you have, that you will work towards win-win far more easier, and you will certainly gain win-win in most of the negotiations that you have. So use your inspirational ability to inspire the other side to work together, to go through the obstacles, to try to find the common things you can work on, to try to look at the positives rather than the negatives. And in trying to inspire the others at the negotiating table, you are using your persuasive skills. You will need a whole lot of range of tactics and skills to try to convince others. If you don't have these skills, these influencing abilities, how on earth can you do business internationally? How can you go to the negotiating table? You can't. So you have to hone your EI competencies. These competencies will give you win-win. And influencing is one of the most important capabilities you will need. You have to talk. You have to be able to convince and persuade. Remember, it's not going to be easy. No negotiation is really ever that easy. There are obstacles every step of the way. There are things that jump out at you that you cannot predict sometimes and you don't expect. So your skills to influence others and to persuade and use different ways to talk about things and see things is going to be essential. You cannot go in international discussion or negotiation without the ability to influence others. One other part of the relationship management side of EI, as I have said, influencing is very important. And it takes us to the next step, the next part of the relationship management of EI. This is where you have the opportunity to develop others. This is a skill, a capability that in your particular role you may need to use when you are overseas in an international environment. Indeed, you would use it at home if you are managing a group of people or a project team. To be able to develop the people in your team is essential, and you have to be able to do that through feedback, through guidance, through coaching, through all sorts of means. So it makes sense that when you're working internationally as well, doing business internationally, you're going to be working with teams of other cultures, and therefore the ability to develop them and show them the way, perhaps show them some of the skills that you have, the knowledge you have, the systems you have, to transfer those to them will take this developing others ability. You will need to be able to coach them sometimes through some of the more intricate things that your party has to offer and their party has to learn. Indeed, it may be that people in your team will be the ones to do that. So therefore, they need to have this competency. Their level of EI has to show that they have this developing others ability to make the whole project successful. And of course, it goes without saying that bringing in change is something that is not easy to do. But if you have a strong sense of emotional intelligence, then being a change catalyst will carry you forward to the next step in change. Being able to manage change is something that's very difficult for a lot of executives. Some of them are very afraid of it. Some of them think that other people can do it, not them. But if you are dealing internationally, and if there are things that come up in the process of your negotiations or the time that you are working overseas, and that those things involve change, then you are going to have to be able to cope with that. You may have to direct people in a new way, in a new path towards achieving the results that you need to do to meet the contract obligations. Sometimes you will find yourself in sticky situations, and therefore you need to be able to be open to change and look at change as it happens so that the obligations can be met successfully. If, for example, you are working with international partners or international teams, and you're not able to adapt to change and you're not able to accept it, then you may be having problems in the future, because it could be a very important requirement that has come forward in order for the obligations to be met. So embracing change and leading change well is an ability that is going to help you in your international business transactions. You know as well as I do that along the way there will be conflict that comes up. And conflict will raise its, we say, ugly head in every step of the process. Of course, at home, with your teams, with your normal work, there will be conflict. But when conflict appears over the negotiating table, when conflict arises when you're dealing with other parties, trying to work through some of the more intricate aspects of the business proposals, then you have to have an ability to be able to resolve disagreements, to be able to look at things and go through things analytically, but at the same time in a way that doesn't destroy relationships, in a way that can try to find common ground, and people will then accept that changes have to be made to reach good solutions, positive solutions. This is a skill that you are definitely going to have in your toolkit when you travel abroad. How to resolve disagreements. How to manage the conflicts that come up between party A and party B. It could be you have to stand up and you have to take a major role in resolving those disagreements. So honing your conflict management skills, deciding right now whether you do have the capability to handle conflict, is very necessary before you travel again overseas. Take a look at yourself. As I have said throughout this lesson, that you need to start to look at all of the competencies that we are touching on. They are very real. They have been researched. They have been written about by not only Daniel Goleman, but many, many, many prominent authors, by many prominent people in the field of human resource management and human resources. So therefore, take a look, a deep look. As we move on, we'll now look at the way that you are able to build relationships and able to cultivate relationships of different networks, of different organizations, cultures, and people. This is going to be essential. This is something that you will have to have confidence also in being able to handle. When you represent your company, not only at home but abroad, you are networking all the time. You are not only building bonds within your teams and your divisions, but you are also building bonds amongst the people that you meet from various chambers of commerce, for example, or from business associations. From everywhere that you are doing business, there will be groups of people and there will be relationships that you have to be able to cultivate and cultivate well. These relationships may have a bearing on how you do business. They may have a bearing on whether you can find a contact for a certain product, or they may have a bearing on whether one particular team wants to work with your particular team. They will have a bearing on the overall relationship and trust that you develop with the other party in your business partnership. So being able to cultivate bonds, being able to maintain a web of numerous relationships and keep those relationships well is one of the other aspects or competencies that we place in managing relationships and the awareness of other people. These, combined with the next particular competency, will ensure that whatever project teams you have in place, those teams will bring success to your business venture. You may be required to work in a collaborative sense. Not only are you working by yourself in many instances, but you are working in a collaborative sense. Do you have that ability to work as part of the team? Indeed, when you're negotiating, you are part of a team, or unless you have been sent by yourself to negotiate a contract. More often than not, you will be sent as part of a team. And when you face another team in another culture doing international business, then your skills at being able to create good teamwork to reach a positive outcome will come into play. You will need to be able to cooperate. You will need to be able to build a very good spirit, actually, a very good harmony amongst the people that are in that room, amongst the people who are involved in that contract. And I am certain that in some industries, the teams that you will be working with will not only be teams of 3 or 4, they will be teams of 30 or 40, and maybe even much larger than that. So the competency we see in EI as teamwork and collaboration is a competency that will hold the whole process together when you're dealing with large numbers of people. People will then look towards you as being someone who can operate in a very complicated, perhaps, environment when there are lots of people involved. And from experience, I'm sure there are lots and lots of people involved in the dealings you've had overseas when it comes to teams. So, to summarize EI, here we have a chart of all of the capabilities and competencies of emotional intelligence. So, in summary, here we have a list, quite clearly, of all the competencies that fall under emotional intelligence. They may seem a lot to you, yes, and they are a lot. And actually, don't feel too worried that there are 19 of them. These things come naturally to us. We have possibly been using these competencies or capabilities for all our working lives. What I have tried to emphasize here in this lesson is that if you are wanting success, or if you are wanting to be effective, and if you want to improve the way that you communicate internationally, or the way that you negotiate internationally, most of these or all of these will come into play. They are necessary, and some are indeed a little bit more important than others in certain areas. For example, self-awareness. If you are not self-aware, if you don't know who you are, if you can't define your strengths and weaknesses, and if you don't have any self-confidence, or your abilities here are on the lower end of things, then you're not really going to be able to perform your role very effectively. This is one area that you may need to look at, and that you may need to build up in order to become competent in international business, for example, or in indeed any business. If you can't manage yourself, if you can't stop your impulses taking over, if you can't show that you are honest about things and you have the will to achieve, if you are not optimistic when obstacles come your way, then this is going to mean that your negotiations may have problems. You're going to have to try harder and harder. You may have to call in on somebody else to help you through the process because your skills are not as high. They're on the lower end. If, when you meet people and deal with people, and this is at home as well as abroad, if you can't have empathy, if you can't see what's going on around you, then you're walking in blind to situations. You're not fully aware of things. How can your company send somebody who is not aware of what's going on around them, who has to always ask what's going on? So the social awareness competencies, these too are very, very important. And finally, if you can't look at other people and manage them by being inspiring, if you can't try to solve problems and manage conflict well, if you can't build bonds between the two teams that you've spent a lot of money on trying to get this deal together for, if you can't manage that, then you are failing in your role. You are going to find that your role is going to become very difficult. At home and internationally, all of these skills are absolutely essential. And when you travel internationally, as I mentioned before, in the international arena, the international environment, EI is well known. People look at you as a professional representing your organization, and they certainly expect certain things of you. They expect that you will behave professionally. They expect that you will have a certain level of these emotional intelligence competencies in order to act in a very professional and a sophisticated way. When it comes down to it, a lot of time and effort is spent when you deal internationally. As we've touched on before, the process of international communication, the process of international contracts, and indeed communication between different parties certainly becomes more complex. So if that process is complex, it means that you have to sharpen your skills even more so. You have to look at the abilities you have and really look for the limitations you've got and improve upon them so that you are capable of getting through those complex procedures. So in summary, please take a look at yourself. Spend time. You could spend an hour one evening just by taking a simple look at yourself. Write on a piece of paper what your strong points are, what your weak points are. Perhaps you may have done this in the past, but how long ago was that? All of these things need to be reviewed from time to time. And to be effective, certainly as an executive, and certainly as someone who travels and meets people from all sorts of countries, to be effective, you have to be very keenly knowledgeable of yourself, very accurate about who you are. So take time, look at yourself. Do it on your computer or do it manually, however you like. Take time to have a cup of coffee or a long cup of coffee and sit with yourself. Look at your abilities. Break down all of the parts that we've discussed in this lesson. Start with the first one, your emotional self-awareness, and go right through to the end. And when it comes to accurate self-assessment, really sit down and look at your strengths. Perhaps you might need to discuss those things with your wife or your husband or with your colleagues to get an accurate idea. Get some feedback. Perhaps you have been doing this periodically in your organization, or Perhaps not. So I would like to suggest, as in the closing of this lesson, take a long, hard look at yourself. Look at your emotional intelligence. What are your strengths? What are your limitations? Take a note and then take a close look at how you might be able to improve upon them before you embark and continue in conducting business in the international environment. Thank you very, very much for listening to this lesson. I do hope that it has given you greater insights into your capabilities, which you will need when you're traveling outside your home country and representing your company or organization. Goodbye for now.